freshly brewed ransomware. It's possible, but is it likely?
So Matt, I hear that there's an interesting little twist to a coffee machine that's out there.
Sure thing. So there is a specific IoT coffee machine, the kind of thing you can control through an app. This is a company, and we're going to, not necessarily mention their name, but they have had a history of devices that have had some security issues. And someone from Avast decided it was time to see how far he could push these security flaws on his own. So he did a little reverse engineering of this IoT coffee brewing device. And it's like a $250 device, at least when it was first came out. And so what he did is he took the same approach you would for any other IoT device. You take a look at the device itself, you take a look at the app and the APIs and things like that to see if there's anything you can do to tamper with it or mess with the software, or in this case, firmware. And as it turns out, there absolutely are plenty of things you can still do to this device. This is, again, an older device, one that's not really in service anymore, unsupported. But what he found is that if you take a look at the device itself and then the app, there's no encryption, there's no authentication, and there's no code signing. So the attack would be in this situation that you would have to get the device back into its initial state, which for a lot of IoT devices, and I think people who have smart devices at their house are probably familiar with this, you plug it in, and it creates an access point that you connect to without a password, usually, and then configure it to work on your home network. So you got to get it in that state, which all in all is not that difficult because you could de-authenticate the device from the network with a couple special packets that Wi-Fi supports. You can just knock it off the network and it will go back into its original state. From there, you upload your custom firmware, and because it's not signed and because there's no encryption, it's very easy to do this. So you can create your own custom firmwares for this coffee maker. But what do you do with it once you've got that? So one idea they had was possibly to mine cryptocurrency with it. But this thing has like an ARM Cortex. It's not a very powerful device. It's very much does its one function, maybe a couple other things on the side, but like there's not a lot of overhead. There's not a lot of it's not worth it. Let's go with that. But they did come up with a example ransomware for it. So if someone was to knock your smart coffee maker off its Wi-Fi, upload a custom firmware with this in it, then they would ask you for money, pay in Bitcoin, sort of thing. So what does this mean? It doesn't mean a whole lot, to be honest with you. I thought it was cool because it's a coffee maker. It's one of those fixtures in the house that I think about a little bit. I have a smart coffee maker. I've thought about doing this kind of research myself and never have had the time. Plus, I want my coffee maker to work at the end of the day, so I haven't done this. But it shows that IoT security is important, because if you take out the coffee making function of this device, and it's not all that different from any other IoT device. The same sort of security model issues apply. So all in all, like having smart devices out there that aren't being maintained, that are not patched, that people are still using because they treat them like appliances and not computers, I think ultimately you'll find that some enterprising criminal will try and find a way to make money off them. Now, I don't think it really makes a lot of sense to drive around New York City de-authing, people's coffee makers for ransom, but it's not impossible, and it's kind of interesting, and I think that kind of research will lead to other more, I guess, impactful findings against more critical IoT.
Yeah, it always worries me. I think of the things that are in my house, right? There's various little cameras, various little equipment, and I think about, okay, their use by themselves is probably, like you said, a coffee maker, fairly innocuous, even if you did ransom somebody's coffee for the day.
Mm-hmm.
But the hopping off capability, so now that they're able to get into that machine and then maybe go somewhere else or map my network to see what else I have, that's where I start getting a little concerned.
Yeah, and it's possible to not brick your device this way, but prevent it from functioning normally.
Yeah,
It
I gotta
tends
keep thinking. Okay. Yeah, I'm just saying, you get into this Coffeemaker and you create like a reverse proxy of some sort onto it, or some other network scanner, and then turns around and finds everything else on the network.
That's true.
Yeah.
Right. As
And
a
some of
footnote
those could be other expensive IoT devices, whereas the coffee machine wasn't a big deal. Oh, if I have a bricked coffee machine, I can probably replace it, hopefully, even if it's with a not IoT coffee maker. But if then I get access to a smart refrigerator or a stove or something that's more pricey to the consumer, then maybe it becomes another it's just a gateway into what else is in the network.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the medical IoT is where I start getting that little sense of challenge, concern, however you want to put it. Is that I got an insulin pump, for example, on my Wi-Fi network. Somebody, and I know that there's Black Hats and DEF CON have been doing some things with medical IoT, but I just think of things that I think it's pretty safe because it's on my network, it's Bluetooth, or NFC or whatever. But if I get a device that's compromised that's on my network, then what else can be hopped off, and get to me?
Mm-hmm. So, what would you recommend people do in that case? Set up a separate IoT-only access point in the house and isolate these things, or set up a VLAN for it at the very least? We're getting into things that are more difficult than I think the average consumer is knowledgeable about or willing to do, especially for the perceived risk, and which in this case is, let's be honest, it's pretty low. Like, you have to be in close proximity to even kick this thing off.
I think your point earlier is that first off, this example is a device that's no longer supported. You really need to make sure that your devices are, especially now that they're computers, not just your toaster or your coffee maker, that that you keep them up to date and supported. They're not, they, like I said, people plug these in and they walk away from it and never think about it. And I think it would be difficult. I was thinking that just what you just said, that you could do a VLAN, but then you think, well, that would be so hard. In the end, even for somebody who knows what they're doing. I'm thinking, but patching them, that's not as hard. And making sure that the devices remain current. I know that there was an effort for a while that they were going to do standards. I think it's still underway, or still maybe not quite taken off yet, but where they do standards about patching and support for IoT devices. Kind of like you do with your underwriter's laboratory stuff. And that might be the solution here is that you make sure that devices is rated, and it's out there, in a supported state.
I feel like I've been hearing about standards or self-governing bodies or whatever for IoT for a very long time, and I'm in favor of the idea, but I haven't seen anything measurable come out of them personally. Maybe it's happening and it's not on my radar for what devices are, haven't been tested in this way. Like, there's no safe IoT sticker out there on the boxes when I go out to, the computer store that says this device has been tested, this device has not. So whether it's happening on the back end and things are getting more secure, quietly, I don't know. Have you guys heard of anything like that?
I think there was a story that we did, maybe it was something I just read, that they, like I said, they were trying to create like an underwriter, laboratory like we have for electronics. The federal government was doing so, and some of the standards bodies, but I haven't heard much from that in a long time.
I'm almost thinking I'm comparing it to when you go out and you buy new appliances and they have those Energy Star stickers and they're talking about how they are at saving you money on your electric bill. It would be nice if there was something like that for your IoT or your smart devices, so you can at least say, okay, I know it passes these standards, because it's not even, I was originally just going to suggest it's really important to obviously do your research before you buy one of these, but even if it's a name brand or even a high-end device, they don't necessarily publish what kind of testing the smart device went through.
It certainly is a challenge. I do recall that there was a movement to do some kind of a stamp like you're talking about for IoT, but I haven't seen much on that, and wouldn't know if like I think you were saying, Matt, is if it was there, would I recognize it? Yeah, I wouldn't look for it because I don't know anything about it.